Macabre scenes of violence, the burning of ballot boxes, the capturing of ballot boxes have emerged from West Bengal, coinciding with the Panchayat poll elections. The BJP and the Trinamool Congress are both blaming the other. The governor has stepped in saying elections are meant to be about the ballot and not about bullets. In fact, there are videos now viral that actually show party workers armed. In some cases, there are men wielding guns. In other cases, there are men wielding swords. There are corpses, pools of blood. This is a panchayat election that we're talking about. The BJP is now approaching the election commission. The BJP says the responsibility for what has happened lies squarely at the door of West Bengal Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee. The Trinamool Congress is hitting back, alleging the misuse of paramilitary forces. This is the big political story today. And to discuss it, let's introduce our newsmaker on the program today. Swapan Dasgupta, BJP leader from West Bengal, joins us. Swapan, thank you. I know you're not too well, so we won't keep you long. But let me ask you what's going through your mind as you look at these images of violence from Bengal. Elections in Bengal have never been non-violent. They've never been without very, very violent clashes. But there's something absolutely crazy about what we've seen through the day today. In the last few hours alone, 12 people are now reported dead. That number would be much higher when we look at the run-up to the moment of polling. How do you look at what's happened?
Well, Barkha, 25 people have died in the entire violence before and after before the polling date.
Yeah.
And you've seen the really bizarre scenes of violence, of destruction of ballot papers, etc. Now, the interesting point about this is that none of this was really unanticipated. It was almost inevitable, and there's a sort of eerie inevitability about what took place. Partly because you're talking about central forces. The point is, central forces were not deployed. The state election commissioner, who appears to be an extremely partisan person and extremely callous in his approach to the entire show, organized the elections without taking into account the ground realities of what would happen. Or he was willfully unmindful of them. Now, every panchayat election is bitterly fought, as you know. And the reason why it's bitterly fought in West Bengal in particular over the past 15 years or so has been because the panchayats have turned out to be a very major agency of corruption. And that is why those who are in power in panchayats are loath to give up anything because their livelihood depends on it. So they cling on to what they can, and they do it through muscle power, money power, through any other power which is possible. Then there is in West Bengal a trend, a very anti-democratic trend, which is you have elections by a show of might. In other words, you stuff the ballot boxes, you ensure that actual legitimate voters don't get a chance to vote. So when you know this tradition is happening, when you know during the general election there was 8-phase election, not the general election, the Vidhan Sabha election.
The assembly election, yes.
Election, there was an 8-phase election, which was reasonably good and well conducted. When you know all this, why did you have a single phase election and tell everybody and delay the entry of central forces for as long as possible and finally ensure that their deployment was a farce? So there's a lot of questions they've got to answer.
Why do you say the deployment of the central forces is a farce? I ask you this because the Trinamool Congress today in its official statements has accused the BJP of misusing these very central forces.
The central forces, you see, when the question of central forces, the State Election Commission said we don't want any central forces. Then, when pressed by the High Court, they said, okay, we'll deploy 20 companies of central forces, one per district. Then, when that was turned out to be a farce, the High Court said, you do exactly what was done in 2013 and ask for 822 companies of Central Forces. So they did it. But the time it took, and they went on appeal to the Supreme Court, they lost every appeal. And by the time it was too late to get the Central Forces. And once the Central Forces came, they were not adequately deployed. So what's the point in having a central forces in the district headquarters? And the central forces are totally dependent on the logistical support of the local police force. They wouldn't know where to go. I mean, that's understandable. So, not in most of the booths, and you can find out throughout the day, the reports will come in. You'll find that in most places, the central forces were not there, and ill equipped, sometimes very partisan police force was there, and they just stepped back when the remotest sign of trouble began. So, I believe that this election, in many ways, was a macabre farce.
The BJP has approached the election commission, or is approaching the election commission,
Which
as
which
we.
election commission? Which election commission?
So
State election
obviously,
commission. Well, there are two. You see, because the panchayat elections are conducted
yes,
by the State Election Commission by the terms of the 73rd Amendment of the Constitution. The Central Election Commission in Delhi has no
yes.
jurisdiction over this one.
So you
So
are
they are
effectively saying, the state election commissioner has been biased.
worse than biased. I mean, I think bias is too mild a term to express him. The terms which have been used against him is that he's a domesticated animal. But I don't want to use those terms, but I think that
What do you mean domesticated animal? You mean
basically he
he's
does everything at the command of the chief minister. The
so
man
you
took
mean
over.
you mean he's like you are
He's
alleging
like a
that he
poodle.
is.
He's like a poodle.
Yes.
Yes, he took over. Within 24 hours of taking over, he announced the elections. Most people were taken by surprise because there was no preparation for it. Not even the BDOs didn't even know where the ballots would be filled in. There was a huge commotion during the filing of nominations. A lot of people couldn't file their nominations, and you knew that that was the early warning signs were there, and you still didn't act on it. And he goes to office at 10 o'clock in the morning and he leaves office at 5 o'clock in the evening. Good Babu, who thinks that he's protected by the Constitution, nothing can happen to him. Therefore, he can violate the spirit of democracy. He can take democracy for a ride and make the third tier of government into an entire farce.
So what then are the options before the BJP? You call the election a macabre farce. You call the state election commissioner a poodle of the chief minister Mamata Banerjee. There has been gory violence. The Trinamool Congress would argue and is arguing
Yes.
that Suvendu Adhikari, the leader of the opposition in the state, made inflammatory speeches, literally urged people to take ballot boxes and chuck them into the pond. Let me read out the Trinamool Congress tweet to you: from demanding the deployment of central forces who stood idly by as our party workers were ravaged, to brazenly threatening to urge central government to keep Bengal's funds blocked, to inciting violence, Suvendu has shown his utmost contempt for the rule of law with his inflammatory speeches and so on.
Undoubtedly, from a distance, some of those speeches would look inflammatory, and I don't doubt it. What I think is very important to understand is that what is the resistance, local resistance possible when you find that your booth has been taken over by the Trinamool Congress and they've already stamped the ballot. There's your paper ballots, mind you, because they insisted on paper ballots. They've stamped everything, stuffed the ballot boxes with them, and there's nothing left for the legitimate voters to do. So these were signs of protest. In a large number of cases, the destruction of ballot boxes, and I don't approve of them, but they were signs of protest by people. Maybe the means of protest could have been far more sophisticated. But you've got to understand how the dynamics work in Bengal. It's a very, very brutalized, very, very brutal society, very polarized society. And mind you, most of these, most of the resistance to the Trinamool took place, very interestingly, in the Muslim areas. Most of the deaths took place in the district of Murshidabad, which is
And
a
most
Muslim.
of those who have died are Muslim.
Exactly, most of them who died. So this was something which was alarming because Trinamool Congress and Mamata Banerjee has taken the Muslims as a captive vote bank, having got more than 90% of their support of that community's support during the Vidhan Sabha elections. And now, if she finds that the whole thing is falling apart for different reasons, she's alarmed. And I think you've got to see it in terms of the political dynamics also. Now, what are the options for you? I think it's very sad, but again, here we are seeing when the executive abdicates its role, people have to turn to the judiciary. Traditionally, the judiciary should not play any role in an election. And that's the convention which has been followed in during general elections or Vidhan Sabha elections. But here is an aberration because of the dereliction of duty by the state election commissioner. So I have a feeling that people will go to court and there'll be a tussle between the judiciary and the executive.
And go to court and ask for what?
I ask for the cancellation of the elections.
So you're saying that you believe that there is enough ground to ask for this particular polling to be cancelled.
Yes, I believe so. I believe there are enough grounds for this bout of panchayat elections to be held in abeyance, and another panchayat election under proper supervision, proper administrative preparation should take place.
And what would be different about the next one?
Well, if you have enough policing, at least the intimidation will stop, the malpractices inside the polling stations will stop. Yes, there'll be tussle, there'll be fights, there'll be all that sort of thing outside. But people will at least have the self confidence to be able to actually go to the uh, polling stations and vote in secret. And I think this in secret is very important in Bengal, as you can see through some of the footage from there, how people are supervising the how people vote.
You said that you don't personally agree with, and some of these videos are viral today. You see young men running away with the ballot boxes in their hands. It actually takes you back to an earlier era of booth capturing, the kind of story that we grew up
Yeah,
on.
exactly.
And the Trinamool Congress is blaming the BJP leadership for urging voters to do this. How do you respond to that charge?
I don't think there was any centralized direction on the part of the BJP. I would deny that absolutely categorically. These were spontaneous action on the ground. And the reasons you'll find are different in different places. From what I've been able to gauge, in some cases, it was a protest against the mass stamping of papers, which is called Chappamar in Bengal. In some cases, it was the some dominant party protesting against the fact that some free and fair voting had taken place, so they decided we'll take away the ballot boxes. So the reasons they differed from place to place. But overall, I think one of the things which is probably the mainstream of these protests, the mainstream of these things, was that these were protests. And I'd say that I don't approve of them. But well, let's understand the real nature of what they were. They were protests. And I think
Against what? They were
they were
protests against
protesting
what?
against electoral irregularities which had taken place inside the polling stations.
Now, for people sitting away from Bengal, seeing the sharp sort of exchange of accusations between the BJP and the Trinamool Congress, it's actually hard to understand clinically, objectively, what else could happen, who's at fault. Is this just a subculture, a sub-political culture of Bengal? Because violence is not new. It's a kind of institutional, it's you scratch the surface, and Bengal elections have, Panchayat elections have always been violent. What makes this election different enough? What makes this election different enough for you to say it should be held in abeyance and a new election should be held?
Well, you see, in most Vidhan Sabha elections, why is the violence controlled? There is violence. It's not that there isn't. But it's controlled and regulated partly because there is an administrative supervision. It may not be perfect, but there is a semblance of administrative supervision which is there, which at least allows the overwhelming majority of people to vote according to their own conscience. I don't think, and we lost the last election, but I personally lost the last election, but I can say that I will not say that it was not free and fair. Now
Okay.
and that was because there was administrative supervision of that. That supervision was just not present here. There was no supervision whatsoever. It was free for all. And because it was free for all the violent impulses which are there in society emerged and found an expression.
In
And
this
that
free for
I
all,
think
though, in this,
because
sorry, go ahead.
it's an enormous tragedy, because I think as it is, Bengal has earned itself a pretty sordid name as being the repository of corruption. Now it's got a new name as as an inherently endemically violent society. And alas, it is true.
Now, we're getting reports that there's going to be repolling held at those booths where a maximum number of violence was reported. This is a statement from the State Election Commission. You're saying this is not enough. You want the entire poll. The BJP wants the entire poll to be held again.
Well, I don't know what the ultimate thing is. Let's get all the new reports. But, the Trinamool Congress spokesman claimed that only 60 booths have seen irregularities of violence and ballot snatching and destruction of ballot papers. Where the ballot papers have been destroyed, obviously you've got to have another set of election. But I think the going by the record of the State Election Commission, they are going to overlook other places where there was no resistance and the
Yeah.
irregularity went along unchallenged. So I
Now,
think
in
this
this
I
this
think we'll have
phrase
to
you
wait a day for all the reports to come in from the districts.
Fair enough. But in this phrase you use, this is a free for all. There's no administrative supervision. There's been no proper policing. The Trinamool Congress has also lost workers. They have
Yeah,
their workers have also been killed. Their workers have also
absolutely,
been killed.
absolutely, absolutely. And I'll tell you why. Because if there was resistance from what the excesses of the Trinamool are, there was sort of resistance. Again, in Murshidabad and some of these places, in the place called Bhangar, which is just an outskirt of Kolkata, a Muslim-dominated area, the fight was between the Trinamool Congress and the ISF, which is a Muslim body. The BJP was not involved. So you can understand what is you can understand the dynamics of the conflict which is going on at present. Trinamool, where every person who loses their life in this sort of thing, it's tragic. It shouldn't happen, whether it's Trinamool, whether it's CPM, whether it's BJP, whether it's ISF. It shouldn't happen. But it's been happening. And I think all parties have received body blows in the process. But the
Yeah.
main purpose, which you must say, is this desire on the part of the Trinamool Congress to actually dominate every level of administration and leave no space for the opposition. A familiar
Yeah.
complaint, you could say.
So finally, you're saying give it a day. You want all of the details to become clearer, and you suspect the BJP will be taking this election to court.
Yes, I suspect.
Thank you, Swapan. We leave it there. A very grim day. What's extraordinary, of course, is that more than 50% people voted through all of this. And can you imagine how much
50%
higher?
is a very low figure in Bengal. In Bengal,
But
the figures normally are about 90.
yes.
50 is a very
Yeah.
low percentage
I,
in
I,
Bengal.
I'm just saying with blood and gore all around you that
Yeah.
and this was only till 3 p.m. So we'll have the final
Yeah.
figures come in of the turnout. Thank you, Swapan. Grim
Thank
day,
you.
as you said. Every party has received a body back home today at the sort of lowest unit, smallest unit of democracy, and that cannot be something that is anything but grim. Thank you very much, and we'll get back to you as we have more details. Thank you.
Thank you, Barkha.
We started Mojo right here in this basement. Just 4 people, 4. And now we're about to hit our first 1 million subscribers. So this is to say thank you to all of you for your support, for your respect, and for your encouragement. We've always gone to where the story is. During the pandemic, when television's big anchors were hunkered down in their studios or at their homes, we hit the road. We traveled from Delhi to Kerala, covering 30,000 kilometers in a small car, reporting from inside ICUs and inside slum tenements. Whether it's flash floods or war zones, we've always put our boots on the ground. In fact, we're just back from Punjab, tailing the Khalistani fugitive Amritpal Singh. And through all of this, we have always put you, the people, first. In an age of partisan polarized media where most journalists are either chamcha ya morcha, we believe the story is sacred and the truth of the story is what matters. And now as we get ready for the next step, we need your help. Become a Mojo member and get first access to all our big interviews. Get a chance to ask our newsmakers questions. Get a chance to write and report for us for both our website and our channels. And also, interact with me and my colleagues directly through AMA sessions. Literally, ask me anything. Click on the join now right next to the subscribe button, and yes, also subscribe if you haven't yet, and become a Mojo member for just 159 rupees a month. Hope to see lots of you in our community. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.